The police cruiser came out of nowhere, engines screaming, tires spitting gravel across Main Street. 1 second, Malcolm Ward was pedaling hard toward the courthouse in Selby Spring. The next, metal slammed into the back of his bike. The impact tore the handlebars from his grip, sent him skidding across sun-baked asphalt, skin scraping raw. The smell of burnt rubber mixed with blood hit his nose before he could even breathe. He hadn't broken a law. He hadn't even made it halfway to bail his brother out. But none of that mattered now. 2 uniforms exploded out of the car, Kurt Maddox and Rick Danner. Their hands hovered over their holsters, eyes cold, voices clipped into hard commands. "Stay down! Don't move!" They looked at him like he was a fugitive, not a man riding an old bike with a backpack strapped to the rack. Malcolm stayed still because training taught him that sudden moves around jumpy men with guns could get you killed faster than any battlefield. Maddox tore the backpack free, ripped it open, and stopped at the sight of neatly stacked cash. Darren's bail money, months of saving, sat in clean bundles, organized like a bank deposit. Rick's smirk said everything. Drug money. No questions, no investigation, just a label, thrown like a stone. In Selby Spring, suspicion was a sentence all by itself. Malcolm's voice stayed even when his pulse didn't. "It's for my brother. I'm posting bail." But the words slid right off them. Maddox shoved a seizure notice into his palm like a consolation prize. No arrest, no charge, just the money gone, swallowed by a system that didn't even bother hiding its hunger. The cruiser pulled away, leaving him in the middle of the street, bike bent, hands stinging from the fall. The courthouse was still there at the end of the road, brick and silent under the sun. But as Malcolm stood, something shifted. This wasn't just about getting Darren out anymore. This was about a fight the town didn't know it had just picked, with the wrong man. Malcolm Ward didn't go straight to the courthouse. The cruiser attack still buzzed in his head, not because he was shaken, but because it confirmed what he already suspected. Someone had marked him before he even hit Main Street. Getting to Darren now meant moving fast and thinking like he was still in the service. Assume every route was compromised, and every stranger might be wearing the wrong badge. The back roads out of Selby Spring twisted through low pines and broken fences, perfect for losing a tail. He kept his bike steady, eyes scanning the tree line, when a black SUV rolled into view up ahead, angled across the road like it had been waiting. The doors opened in perfect sync, 2 men stepping out in dark windbreakers with big yellow FBI across the chest. They moved like they'd rehearsed this 100 times. One of them lifted a hand, palm out. "Mr. Ward, we're here to help with your brother's case. Need you to come with us." It would have been convincing if Malcolm hadn't spent years training real federal teams. The radio on the taller man's shoulder was set to a local VHF channel, not Bureau Secure. His boots were civilian issue, bought off a rack, and the way the shorter one scanned the tree line was all wrong. Rookie eyes that didn't know what to watch for. Malcolm slowed just enough to look compliant, stepping off the bike. "You boys from Jackson Field office?" The taller man nodded automatically. That was the tell. Jackson didn't have a field office anymore. In one smooth motion, Malcolm closed the gap, grabbing the fake agent's radio hand and twisting hard enough to make the mic crackle. The man's partner lunged, but Malcolm pivoted low, letting his elbow drive into the man's ribs. 2 seconds later, both were on the ground, breathing, but humiliated. Malcolm pulled the radio free, thumbing the transmit key. "This is Ward. 2 men impersonating federal officers on County Road 6. Broadcasting on open VHF. Over." He didn't wait for a reply. Dropping the radio on the hood of the SUV, he wheeled the bike around and pushed hard for the next turn. He didn't need to know who sent them. The point was clear. Someone was willing to dress their people up like the FBI to make him disappear quietly. The next safe stop was the Golden Lantern, a squat brick building that had been serving steamed buns and pepper beef since before Malcolm was born. Victor Chen, the owner, had given Malcolm a job bussing tables the week he came home from the Marines. No questions asked. If there was one man he could trust with Darren's bail money, it was Victor. The kitchen smelled of garlic and sesame oil, steam rolling from a row of bamboo baskets. Victor was bent over the counter, sleeves rolled, knife moving like a metronome. "You look like hell," he said without looking up. "Had a morning," Malcolm replied. "Need a favor. Big one." He told Victor everything: the cruiser, the seizure, the bogus FBI stop. Victor didn't waste time doubting him. He walked into the back office, came out with a flat metal case, and clicked it open. Inside were neat stacks of bills, bound tight with paper straps. "It's not everything you lost, but it'll post bail. Just get him out before they decide to make it worse." Malcolm took the case, the weight in his hands heavier than the bills inside. This was trust, earned over years, and it made him want to get Darren out more than ever. By the time he left the Golden Lantern, the sun was already sliding west. He cut through the side streets toward his place, planning to lie low until morning. But when he looped back past Victor's block just before dusk, the street was lit up in red and blue. 2 cruisers out front, a third idling in the alley. Officers streamed in and out of the side door, one of them carrying the same metal case Victor had just handed him. Victor stood on the sidewalk, hands folded in front of him, face calm in a way Malcolm recognized from his own time overseas. It was the calm you wore when you'd already accepted the outcome. The lead officer said something Malcolm couldn't catch, then slammed the cruiser's trunk. They didn't look around for witnesses. They didn't care. Malcolm stayed in the shadows until the street cleared. When he crossed over, Victor's voice was low. "Said it was a compliance check, but they went straight for the safe. Didn't even look at the registers." The message was clear. It wasn't random. Someone was burning down every bridge he had. There was only one place left to go, the source. The Selby Spring Police Department sat on a corner lot, squat and square, the flag out front limp in the evening air. Inside, the lobby smelled like burnt coffee and printer toner. Behind the counter, Officer Elena Brooks looked up from her computer. Early 30s, uniform crisp, eyes steady. She didn't give him the once-over like most did. "Can I help you?" "I need to see Clayton Voss," Malcolm said. "Now!" She studied him for a second, then picked up the phone. Moments later, the double doors swung open and Voss filled the frame. He was the kind of man who thought his presence was enough to settle a room. "Ward," he said, not as a greeting, but as a verdict. "You've had an interesting day." Malcolm didn't blink. "You've got my money, I'm here for it, or you tell me what charge you're holding it on." Voss smirked. "No charge, just procedure. But here's the thing. I'll give you 10,000 back. You forget about the rest. You stop knocking on doors." It was bait. Take the breadcrumb, and he'd look like he'd been paid off. Refuse, and they'd make him disappear like the cash. Malcolm let the pause hang, then said, 10,000. Tomorrow morning." Voss nodded once. "Smart choice." But as Malcolm walked out into the fading light, he knew this wasn't a choice at all. It was just the next move in a game he hadn't agreed to play, but one he was already winning simply by staying on the board. By the time Malcolm stepped into the station lobby the next morning, the sun had barely cleared the rooftops, but the air inside was already heavy. Elena was at the desk, posture a little stiffer than yesterday. "Voss is waiting for you," she said, though something in her voice suggested there was more she wasn't saying. Malcolm walked through the double doors expecting a quick transaction, an envelope, maybe a warning, but what he got instead was Voss leaning against his office door with that same infuriating half-smile. "Your brother," Voss said, drawing out the pause. "He's not here. Moved him first thing this morning. Different facility." The words were meant to sting, and they did. Malcolm's jaw tightened. "You moved him before we even finished the deal?" Voss shrugged, all false nonchalance. "Procedure, you know how it is." That was the crack in the dam. The back and forth went from clipped to hostile in seconds, each word heavier than the last, until they were both stepping into each other's space. Voss's smirk never reached his eyes, and Malcolm had seen enough men like that to know exactly what came next. When the first shove came, he didn't retreat. He drove forward. The two crashed through the side door into the courtyard, boots grinding against gravel. Voss swung, but Malcolm blocked, caught his wrist, and turned it sharply until Voss's balance broke. In 3 moves, the chief was pinned, Malcolm's weight locking him down. "Open the evidence room," Malcolm ordered, voice low enough to cut through the tension without carrying to the onlookers who had started to gather. Voss resisted for a second, but the pressure on his shoulder made him fumble for the keys. The reinforced metal door clicked open to reveal a sight that didn't belong in any small-town department. Racks of military-grade rifles, crates with serial numbers filed off, and bundles of cash stacked shoulder-high, all tagged with evidence tape. Before the other officers could swarm, Elena appeared in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "I've got him," she announced, taking Malcolm by the arm in a grip that looked firm but guided him toward the exit. "Walk with me," she whispered once they were outside. "Don't look back." The reprieve didn't last long. That afternoon, Malcolm was headed toward the courthouse with fresh money from a friend who'd quietly stepped in after hearing about Victor's loss. The plan was to post bail immediately, no gaps for the department to exploit. But as soon as he hit the steps, movement caught his eye. A flash of black on the roofline, then the sharp rhythm of boots hitting stone. The special unit closed in fast, their formation tight, weapons raised. He had just enough time to turn before the first concussive round slammed into him, the air leaving his chest in one violent rush. The world tilted, hands grabbed him, dragging him down the steps and into the back of an unmarked van. Inside, the dim space smelled of oil and gunmetal. Voss sat opposite, legs spread, eyes locked. He slid an envelope across the floor. Malcolm's cash, neatly bundled. "You can have it," Voss said, his tone flat. "But your brother? He's in the infirmary now. Somebody decided to send him a message." That night, Malcolm met Marcus Bell, a court clerk with the kind of careful eyes that suggested he knew more than he should. "There's a storage room under the courthouse," Marcus murmured, glancing over his shoulder. "Off the books. If you're quick, you might get there before they burn it." The basement smelled of damp concrete and old paper. Malcolm and Elena moved fast, following Marcus's directions to a heavy steel door. Light flickered underneath. Firelight. Inside, a row of bankers' boxes burned slowly, the flames eating toward the center. Malcolm grabbed a half-empty water bottle from his pack and doused the nearest box, steam hissing into the air. They sifted through the wet, charred remains until Elena found it, a small fireproof case tucked against the wall. Inside, cushioned in foam, was an unmarked SD card. It was the kind of thing that could change the game. 2 nights later, Malcolm lay in the gravel behind the Selby Spring Communications Hub. The keypad lock gave way in seconds, the muscle memory from his service years still sharp. Inside, the hum of servers and radios filled the narrow space. He slid the SD card into the main console and cued a 5-second loop. Voss and Maddox, side by side in the illegal weapons vault. Every patrol car and handheld in the department lit up with the clip. It wasn't the full story, but it was enough to make the walls shake. The call came the next morning. Blocked number. Voss's voice low and deliberate. "Rebel Ridge, noon. Bring the card. You get your brother back." When Malcolm arrived, Elena was already there, standing stiff beside 2 armed officers. She didn't look at him. Voss stepped forward, palm out. Malcolm handed over the SD card, watching as Voss snapped it in half, then ground the pieces under his boot. The crack of plastic was soft, but it felt like the door slamming shut. Voss leaned close, his words a quiet knife. "She didn't do it for me. She did it because I told her Sienna wouldn't survive the night otherwise. You might want to check on your friend, if she's still breathing." Malcolm didn't move. His stillness wasn't surrender. It was the measured silence of a man already planning the next strike. Malcolm stood there, letting the moment, his eyes locked on Voss's with a stillness that made the air feel heavier. Rebel Ridge wasn't just a meeting spot. It was a place chosen for control, Isolated, high ground, no easy exits. The wind cut across the ridge, carrying the faint metallic rattle of the officers' rifles. Elena's face was pale, her gaze fixed somewhere past Malcolm, as if looking at him directly might break whatever fragile bargain she'd made to keep Sienna alive. Voss straightened, signaling to his men to lower their weapons, but only slightly. "You walk away now, Ward. You leave Selby Spring for good, and maybe your brother gets to see another sunrise." His tone was smooth, but the threat in it was concrete. Malcolm's mind filed it away. Voss was never going to let Darren walk free without a price, and the card they'd destroyed was only one of several pieces of leverage still in play. The officers stepped aside, giving him a path to leave. Malcolm took it, but every step down that rocky slope was calculated. His head wasn't on the retreat. It was on the angles. Who was watching? Which vehicles were here? And how many of those rifles had a clear line of sight? This wasn't over, not by a long shot. When he reached the base of the ridge, the smell of pine and dust mixing in the air, he allowed himself one last glance upward. Elena was still watching from the crest, her stance rigid. He couldn't tell if it was guilt, fear, or both that held her there. It didn't matter. She had given him something he hadn't had before. Confirmation that Voss would threaten anyone to keep his grip tight. That meant everyone close to him was now in the crosshairs. Malcolm swung a leg over his bike and started the long ride back toward town, the wind cold against his skin. The SD card was gone, but he still had the memory of its contents. And now he had a deeper read on Voss's methods. And in a fight like this, knowing how the other side played was almost as valuable as the evidence itself. He didn't head straight for the motel. Instead, he cut through the outskirts, avoiding main roads, until the lights of Selby Spring faded behind him. Somewhere out there was a new move, one Voss wouldn't see coming. Malcolm intended to find it before the night was over. The gunfire at Selby Spring PD started as a single crack and bloomed into a roar that shook the glass in the front lobby. Malcolm had expected noise. What he hadn't expected was who the shooter was aiming at. Through the strobing chaos of muzzle flashes, he caught a glimpse of Lieutenant David Rourke, once Voss's shadow, turning his rifle not on Malcolm, but on the men in Voss's own squad. It wasn't clean, it wasn't coordinated, but it was enough. Rourke shoved an overturned desk toward Malcolm, creating a barrier against incoming rounds. "Get her out!" he barked. Malcolm turned to see Elena, cuffed to a chair, blood soaking her shoulder. She was conscious, barely, her eyes tracking the firefight like she was still trying to work the angles. Malcolm dove low, snapping the chain on her cuffs with a pry bar he'd hidden in his boot. The air smelled of cordite and burnt drywall. Voss's voice bellowed orders from somewhere deeper inside, but the tide had shifted. Men loyal to him were falling back, unsure who was with them anymore. Rourke slammed a palm-sized drive into Malcolm's hand. "Backup footage. External cam. It caught everything." No time for thanks. Malcolm shoved the drive into his vest pocket, grabbed Elena under the arms, and followed Rourke toward a side exit as glass shattered overhead. Outside, the night air was cold and wet against the sweat on Malcolm's skin. He slid Elena into the passenger seat of a battered Suburban. Her breathing was ragged. "Stay with me, Brooks," he muttered, flooring the gas. The bridge to County General was only 5 miles away, but in this county, 5 miles was an eternity. They didn't make it halfway before the dark silhouettes appeared ahead. A semi-truck angled sideways blocked both lanes. Men in tactical gear poured out of pickups, rifles raised. Then came the metallic thump on the roof of the Suburban. One man, then two, then three, boots pounding above their heads. Malcolm swerved hard, trying to shake them, but the bridge was narrow. Through the side mirror, he saw one of Voss's men raise a crowbar, swinging down toward the windshield. Malcolm slammed the brakes, throwing the attacker forward, then floored it again, sending another sprawling. The third hung on, scrambling toward the driver's side, his boots rattling like drum beats above Malcolm's head. "Elena, down!" he shouted, and she slid as far as she could into the footwell. The man on the roof reached the edge, one hand braced, the other pulling a knife. And that's when the roar came, not from the Suburban, but from behind. Rourke's truck hit the blockade at full speed, metal shrieking as the semi's trailer twisted. The path ahead split open like a wound. "Go!" Rourke's voice crackled over the radio. Malcolm floored it, the Suburban lurching forward. The man on the roof lost his footing, tumbling over the guardrail into the dark water below. Behind them, the wreckage of Voss's roadblock burned in the rain. They didn't stop, not until the glow of the hospital lights cut through the storm. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, Malcolm had a real ally, a real copy of the truth, and a chance to turn the game back on Voss. The hallway outside Darren's hospital room smelled faintly of antiseptic and burnt coffee. Machines hummed softly inside, steady but fragile. Darren was alive, barely, but the color in his face had returned, and the doctors said he would make it through the night. Malcolm stood at the foot of the bed, hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets, feeling that strange blend of relief and rage. His brother had survived the ambush, but the charges still stood. In the eyes of the court, he was still a criminal. Down the corridor, Sienna sat on a molded plastic chair, a paper cup of cold tea between her palms. She wasn't wearing her uniform anymore. The badge and nameplate were gone. Fired in the middle of the night, escorted out under the stares of people she used to call colleagues. But she hadn't lost her fire. "I'm testifying," she told Malcolm without hesitation. "Everything I've seen, everything they made me cover up, it all comes out, no more hiding." Her voice didn't shake. Hale arrived later, still in his duty blues, but the lines on his face seemed deeper. He wasn't here as a cop tonight. He was here as a man who'd seen enough. "When they call me to the stand," he said, "I'm not protecting anyone. Not Voss, not Maddox, not this department." The silence between the three of them was heavy but clean, like the air after a storm. The legal battle ahead would be brutal. Voss still had allies in the courthouse and the machine of civil asset forfeiture. The same law they'd twisted to strip families of their homes and cars was still humming in Selby Spring. That machine didn't just take property, it took hope. It took the idea that the system could be fair. If this were a film, the scene might end here, but real life doesn't cut to black when you want it to. Malcolm knew the fight wasn't about one crooked cop or one bad case. It was about a system designed to keep people scared, small, and silent. He looked directly into the lens of the camera, the one streaming for the town, the state, and whoever else was willing to watch. His voice was calm, measured, but the steel underneath was unmistakable. "In this place, justice isn't something that just exists," he said. "It's something you take, inch by inch, against every hand that's trying to push you back." The feed went viral within hours. Comments flooded in from veterans, single mothers, small business owners, all people who had felt the cold edge of a system that could take everything without charging you with a crime. The phrase "inch by inch" started appearing on protest signs. Civil asset forfeiture, 3 words most Americans had never thought about, was suddenly being debated on morning news shows. On the channel's closing note, the voice of the host cut in, steady, personal, unafraid. What happened in Selby Spring isn't rare. It's not even unusual. Across America, laws meant to take the profit out of crime are being used to take the breath out of the innocent. A corrupt sheriff's office can pad its budget by turning your car into its evidence locker. A small-town judge can greenlight raids that never make the evening news. And unless people speak up, unless they share stories like this one, that cycle keeps spinning. If you've watched this far, don't let it be just another headline. Share this story. Talk about it. Because every town like Selby Spring survives on fear and silence, and the only thing stronger than both is the truth. The screen faded to black, but the ripple had already begun.